Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Infatuasian podcast. This is, I guess, officially the last episode of AAPI Heritage Month here in America. And we had a good one, if I do say so myself. We had a double dose of Amy Tan. I'm still riding the high of speaking with her, followed by a great chat with John Wang of Big Asian Energy. I really like that guy. And we are now wrapping up with an episode with Vicky Nguyen. So that is a pretty good May. But you know us, we're not done there. We're going to have lots more. I mean, it's pretty much AAPI Heritage Month every month around here. So coming up next, we have Raina Chan. She is from Hong Kong. She's an etiquette coach. Yeah, etiquette coach. Like what fork to use, how to be smooth in conversation. She's fantastic. So that's coming up next week. Then, do you remember our old pal Jeff Yamazaki? He's a Instagram fashion influencer, but he and his wife, Naomi, go back and forth between LA and Tokyo. So they are Japanese travel experts. So I had them both on to give us some tips and tricks when you're traveling to Japan. So that'll be fun for any of you planning a trip to Japan. Then we just talked to someone named Vicky Tan. Vicky is an author, but by trade, she's a product designer. And she wrote a book called Ask This Book a Question. And it's a designer's take on how to approach life's small and big decisions. So she's great. That was a lot of fun too. And then to wrap up June, we're going to have another Blackboard 4 episode with Jackie, Vicky, and Lone. This time we're going to be talking about Asian parents. So that'll be a fun one to end June with. And stay tuned. We got more in July too. So just giving you June for now, but we got lots of good episodes coming up. But today's episode is really special too, because we're chatting with Vicky Nguyen. Vicky is an NBC anchor and correspondent on the Today Show, but we know her from working at NBC Bay Area, and she's going to talk about her book, Boat Baby, where she's going to talk about her journey from Saigon to America as a 2-year-old and how she worked her way all the way up from local news all the way to 30 Rockefeller Center and doing the national news. And I've been a fan of Vicky's for a long time because, well, you'll hear about it in the show, but she used to write this blog about parenting, and her kids are about the same age as my kids. And so it was really kind of a dream to chat with her. So you can tell I'm pretty excited about this episode. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this episode right after this. Today we are joined by Vicky Nguyen. Vicky is an anchor and correspondent for the NBC News and the Today Show. But us Bay Area people, we know Vicky from way back when she was on NBC Bay Area, proud USF Don, and a Santa Rosa kid. Shout out Pioneer High School. Go Prospectors.
Let's go Prospectors. That's right.
So deep roots here in the Bay Area, which you can read about in her new memoir, Boat Baby. Hello and welcome to the show, Vicky Nguyen.
Curtis, what a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Oh, and happy belated Mother's Day to you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful weekend of weather here in New York. So we spent most of the weekend outside and it was idyllic.
Nice. You get spoiled a little bit?
Yeah, it was the perfect combination too. We did some things in the morning, my husband and I and the 3 girls, and then we went to dinner with my mom and dad. So it's like a whole split thing because now we got 3 moms in the family, right? We've got Brian's mom, Mary Lou, happy Mother's Day to her, but also my mom who lives nearby, and then myself. I finally feel like I've earned the street cred to be appropriately celebrated as a mother because it took a long time, many years for me to feel like Mother's Day had anything to do with me other than celebrating my own mom.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It takes a minute to switch sides.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the first time I've read your memoir. Now let me know if this scares you, but I'm a long time. I go back to the blog. I go back to VickyNguyen.com.
Yes, I love that. When I saw in your notes that, you wanted to talk about that in my writing style, it was like, oh my gosh, one of my original readers. But yeah, Bloggity was the thing back in the day. I was a reporter then, and I think maybe I had just had Emerson, my first daughter. So we're
Uh-huh.
talking, 16 years ago, when
Yeah.
I had some musings on the internet, and it was just mostly about like working and being a new working mom.
Well, here's the thing too, is because I have a kid who just turned 15 today, and my second kid
Aw, happy
is
birthday.
12, almost 13. So it sounds like we lined up pretty well. Because I remember reading when you're going through it with someone and they're going through it too. It's just it resonates. It resonates.
Definitely.
So actually, we like to greet our guests in the Asian way. So it's like 2 in the afternoon over there. But have you eaten yet, Vicky?
You know what? I have eaten my first meal of the day, which I generally try to eat around 9:30, depending on my schedule. I'm
Uh-huh.
either on the Today Show at 7:40 in the morning or 8:12 in the morning, and then sometimes 9 a.m. And then I will come back to my office, and that's usually when I have my first meal. I will have had coffee by then, but I won't have had like a real meal. So that's like
Uh,
my breakfast lunch. Then my
uh-huh.
show is conveniently or inconveniently right between the hours of 12 and 2 p.m. So right
Okay.
during like your hungry lunchtime. So generally I will grab some food after the show, depending on whether or not I have Zooms scheduled or an interview or a shoot to go to. But I always have snacks with me, and I try not to let myself get too hangry, because a hangry Vicky is not a Vicky that anybody wants to deal with.
All right. Good to hear. We don't want a hangry Vicky here. So hey, this book, thank you so much for writing it down. I think there are millions of stories, and none of them, no two are alike, but I'm really glad that you wrote this down. Was there something that kind of prompted you to do this right now in 2024, 2025?
The process started 3 years ago, and back
Okay.
then I had only been at the network for 3 years, and I thought, not a lot of people know me yet, but I think this story is so important to record, because my experience as a Vietnamese American boat baby, really a refugee who came here at the age of 2 with my parents, is one that we haven't really read a whole lot about from a
Mm-hmm.
first person account. I have read some great memoirs like Owner of a Lonely Heart and The Manicurist's Daughter, and A Man with Two Faces, Viet Nguyen. He, has written a lot about the refugee experience, both from a nonfiction and fiction perspective. Um, but when I went to do some of the research to see who else has written about this, not a lot of names came up. Saigon is a great one by Phuc Tran. He's
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great book, right? But just nothing in the vein of my own family's experience. And so I was so happy to get the opportunity to put it all down. And I think there's no better time than the present. So when this chance came about to pursue a book deal, it was like, yeah, absolutely. All systems go. And I'm just really fortunate that Priscilla Paynton, who is a big wig over at Simon and Schuster, had watched a lot of my coverage on the Today Show through the pandemic. She and her husband said that they turned to me for a lot of practical
Uh,
advice, and like the rest of America, we were all learning together and getting the best subject matter experts and doctors and epidemiologists to tell us how we were to
mm,
contend with this coronavirus. So she was familiar with me and my work, and that just helped me tremendously to open the door to this opportunity. I mean, of course, I think as a young reader myself who like devoured all books, loved the library, loved,
mm.
Roald Dahl, Beverly Cleary, Judy Blume, the guy that wrote the Encyclopedia Brown series, or was it a gal? It's been a while. But just essentially any of those books, I always had such a reverence for authors and writers, and to write your own book. I mean, what an incredible privilege, honor, responsibility, all of the things. And so I'm just so happy that it exists in the world today.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a story, and I think you said this. Your parents didn't really talk about it that much with you, and it's a story that has shaped us. Like I'm a little older than you, but I'm in that range and born in the 70s as well, where we all went to school with kids. Well, I'm in San Francisco, right? So we all went to school with kids that probably had similar experiences, but no one ever talked about it.
Right.
And it was just something that shaped our communities, our Asian American communities in profound ways, but no one wrote it in books. You didn't see any movies or stories about it.
Yeah, and you
And
weren't taught
so,
about it in school, really. There were no like history lessons to explain this experience, certainly not
mhm,
from a firsthand perspective. I think the most that we knew about it was like, your family came on a boat. Oh, my family came on a boat. Oh, your family survived a pirate attack. So did mine. It was just kind of like in the background. And so as you get older and you meet people and you go in the world and you think, oh, there aren't actually that many Vietnamese here in America. This happened 50 years ago, which is relatively recent history if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you recognize, wow, this is a story that is so important. It totally deserves to be told. It is an American story. It is also a testament and tribute to the generosity of the people in this beautiful country that, helped raise me alongside my parents, like the teachers, the instructors, the sponsor families. And, to go from boat baby refugee to national network anchor and correspondent in one generation,
Yeah.
it's kind of incredible. And I am in awe all of the time about the way that our lives have unfolded, my parents and mine. And that's not to say there aren't ups and downs, because there are, and I write about them in the book. But overall, to celebrate Mother's Day with my two parents who are with me in New York, moved out here 6 years ago when this big job came up to help us with our kids. My oldest is 16, so she was 10 at the time, right? My littlest is 8 now, so she was 2. We were in the thick of it, right? With like little kids, 2 busy working parents moving from California to New York City, and then getting hit by a pandemic. None of my success, none of what is happening in my life right now would be anywhere remotely close to possible without my parents.
Yeah. When did you first hear the story? The whole pirate attack and the whole, being carried on, by your uncles and stuff. When did you start to hear stories? Or was it slowly over time, or did you just have to ask?
Yeah, I definitely heard slowly over time as a kid when your parents are talking to other people and you catch bits and pieces. But, I was like a pretty American kid, right? Like 10, 11, 12. It wasn't until we went back to Vietnam for the first time at 11 that I think that was a real seminal moment for me, changing my perspective and really understanding what my life might have looked like if my parents hadn't left Vietnam. What kind of education level would I have accomplished? They always talked about how they wanted me to have access to education and have freedom. And that was a real light bulb moment to recognize, okay, here's what some of my cousins are doing. Here's what other kids my age are doing. And I came back to the United States and felt like, wow, you really can't take your opportunities for granted. You have to make the most of this life that you have been given. Your parents made a lot of sacrifices and took a lot of risks for you to have this life. So I think early on, that was imprinted on me. So I heard stories about, their escape. But I think as parents, you try to protect your kids. You don't tell them about these crazy things that you've survived and endured, because you're not trying to scare them. And so I got a much more complete picture when it became an assignment, right? When you have to write this down for a book and you have to really get the details. And was it March or was it May when you crossed? And I came to find out that it was May in the American calendar, but my parents in the Vietnamese calendar, there was this saying that like in March, the ocean is so calm, even an old lady could cross it. And so there were like things like that where you're like, wait, I don't understand. You keep telling me May, but then you'll say it was March because the ocean was calm. And then, all the little bits that are kind of sometimes lost in translation or their recollection, you're piecing it all together. And even now there's all these details that I wish I had put into the book. But at some point you kind of have to write it down and then keep moving forward. Otherwise the book becomes like 12,000 pages.
Yeah. No, I think so much respect to people who came over, your parents' generation, who came over, because like you said, you were moving to New York with a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old, and that's in America, right? With a budget, with a moving budget, and we're pretty developed here in this country. But to think about doing that with an 8-month-old, or some people left with 5 kids, some people left with less money or whatever, for anyone to make it through that situation. And like in your book is like maybe one sentence, you're like, oh yeah, and we were 10 months in a refugee camp. I can't imagine 10 months with a newborn or a very small toddler at a refugee camp, fighting for food, fighting against diseases. Like, just so much respect for that generation, for sure.
Truly. And, that 10 months went by with so much uncertainty because you didn't know it was going to be 10 months, right? You did, like, the weeks stretch into months, stretch into more months. We were lucky, actually, though. If you look back and think 10 months, that's not that long of a time, given when you see what's happening with other people. I mean, today, Idan Alexander is being released from captivity. He was held hostage for a year and a half after being captured by Hamas. And so you think about, all of the things that we have endured, and you have such compassion for other people, and you understand what it means to live in uncertainty and do your best and to try to survive no matter what life throws at you. So yeah, I'm sure it was very tough for my parents who had like rice and cabbage to eat, and once in a while could buy fish, from the Malaysian fishermen who would come ashore. But you really didn't know when you were getting off that island. You didn't know who would potentially sponsor you. And you're right, like disease was common because you've got thousands of people living on a small patch of beach with very makeshift housing and plumbing. And, we were lucky that the United Nations was involved, food was being sent, but every day was kind of an exercise in survival and, hope that it would get better, hope that you would get off this island.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the moments in your book where I got chills was when you just quoted your mom's letter. It was like one sentence long. Your mom had worked for an adoption agency in Vietnam, and it was an American company, I guess. And so they asked your parents, well, do you have any connections in America? And your mom says, well, I'll give it a shot, and wrote like a 2-sentence letter to America just saying, hey, I need to get out of Vietnam. Can you help me? And someone got that letter, and now we're so used to, if I text you, I'm used to a response within minutes. But you wrote a letter and just went out into wherever, and you don't know if it's ever going to get there, and took a month to get back to you, I'm sure, or 2 months.
At least.
Yeah,
that was, my mom used to work for Holt International Children's Services and during the war. And actually on April 30th, 1975, the fall of Saigon, well before my mother had ever met my father, she was actually in a van that Holt had arranged for her to get to Tan Son Nhut Airport, where everybody was being evacuated.
Mm-hmm.
And she was there with her sister. And she told me that, the hope was that they were going to get on an airplane and get out of Saigon through Holt. But then rockets started falling. The airport was being bombed, and she got too scared. So she and her sister left. They went home. And so it wouldn't be for another year or so until she met my dad, and then a year or so more until they, got married, and then later I was born. So that's why they didn't actually leave until 1979 when I was 8 months old. But my mom's letter, it was longer than 2 sentences. I just wrote the beginning of it, which was the gist was, Dear Holt, I used to work for you. We are stranded on a refugee camp right now. We need someone to sponsor us to America. Can you help us? And it was Winnell Ware, who was working in Eugene, Oregon, a fellow Holt employee, who got that letter and ran it down the hall to the director and said, we have to help this family. And I'm so happy that we've remained in touch with Don and Winnell Ware, who live in a little tiny town in Oregon called Brownsville, where they actually filmed Stand By Me. And most recently, I was able to bring Don and Winnell from that little tiny town to New York City to the famous Today Show Plaza, where Coldplay was performing, where the entire cast of Dateline was on the show that day. They had a complete behind-the-scenes Today Show tour. They're obviously big fans of Savannah and Craig and Hoda and Al Roker, and they got to meet everyone. And it was such a wonderful moment for me to welcome them, to give them a memory that I hope they'll never forget, and just to show them, can you believe it? This is what you made possible. You said, hey, we got to help this family. And as Winnell put it, we did a Today Show story. You can look it up. If you look up my name and Don and Winnell Ware, it'll come up. But it's such a heartwarming story, and it just reminds you of what is possible in the world. And Winnell says, it doesn't take a lot. If you have a little, give a little. And truly, that made the biggest ripple effect in my family's lives.
Yeah. Oh, man. You just gave me more chills. That's so cool. That's really cool for them. And they weren't expecting anything out of this, right? Of course, they were just doing what they thought was right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. The American church, or the Christian church, has taken some knocks for many reasons, of course. But I'd venture to bet, or I'm willing to say, that might be the greatest social thing that the American church ever did, socially to help them.
Continues to do. Catholic churches, Christian churches, just places of worship and communities of faith that make the biggest difference in people's lives. And they don't see borders, and they see families, and they see what we all share, which is our humanity and just wanting the best for our children. And that's what they do. They collect donations, they open their doors, they raise money, and they give people a chance at a life. And while I am not a part of any organized religion, the community service that churches and faith-based groups provide around the world on a daily basis is an extreme testament to what it means to give back to the community and never know what your contributions will do. It's done so much good on this earth. And so I think, it is nice to remember that. It was like a Lutheran church and a Methodist church that also teamed up and sponsored us with the help of Don and Winnell and, the families within those two organizations. So yeah, we're super grateful. And I'm just so happy that these organizations are thriving. And we just, there's an American Pope now. And I think that what Pope Francis did before Pope Leo really did bring a lot of people back into the Catholic faith. I think that his emphasis on the underserved and people who are living in marginalized communities and how humble he was and how he led with example, right up until the end with his very unadorned casket, and keeping it simple and keeping it eye level. He was always of the people, with the people. And I think that a lot of people returned to the Catholic faith because of his leadership.
Agreed. So you lived your childhood here, well, most of it in California, a little bit in Reno for a minute or so. And one of the things I thought was really cool is that a little Vicky Nguyen would just find adults to kind of mentor you along the way, whether it's your babysitter upstairs or your playmate's mom. Or the one thing I thought was really cool is that the vet clinic next to your parents' store just gonna let you be assistant of the year or something over there.
Seriously, Dr. Joy Mueller at the time was so light years ahead of, others and was willing to welcome a little 11-year-old me as an intern, basically. I mean, I was bored to death, spending summers at my parents' furniture store, and her veterinary clinic, brand new, had just opened literally across the parking lot. And we had a dog. We took the dog there. And I just thought, you know what? I really want to be a veterinarian. I love animals. Maybe she'll let me hang out with her. And so I went over and just asked her if I could just stay there for a few hours a day and just watch what she was doing. And to her incredible credit, she and the vet techs there were like, sure. And so I started probably that day or was like, okay, I'll just stay then. And she let me observe. Then I was like cleaning the tables. Then I was drawing up vaccinations. Next thing you know, I'm also administering shots for dogs and cats. And I got to watch so many surgeries and, it would bathe animals. I mean, it was such a hands-on, incredible experience. Like nobody would do that now because it's like, oh, liability. Whose kid are you?
Yeah.
What is this? What? No way. But back then in the early 90s, she was, or maybe it was even the late 80s, actually. She was so awesome. One of these like incredible, trusted adults. And then I remember it just became, she would go to like this mall, this fancy mall I'd never been to in Corte Madera. It was 45 minutes away. And she would invite me along and then take me out for like lunch in what I thought was such a fancy place. It was like the Bodine Cafe, where you could get like the sourdough bread bowl with the clam chowder. And I just thought this was like incredible, like how kind of her. She just sort of introduced me to a very different life. Growing up Asian American, I did not go out to eat at all, hardly. Like parents cooked everything. If you did eat out, it was fast food. It was KFC or McDonald's or Carl's Jr. Not that I'm complaining. I loved that. That to me was like amazing. That was fine dining. But I didn't really have that relationship with outside restaurants and fast casual dining or, any of those kinds of experiences. And I did. I had a Taekwondo instructor, Mr. Hout. He was an incredible mentor as well. And my parents, I think, were much more trusting and just thought, oh, these are positive influences in her life. These are adults. I mean, a veterinarian, a Taekwondo instructor, teacher. Certainly these people, know and have something to offer. And so they were more than happy to have me hanging out with these people who I was very lucky to have met.
Yeah. No, it sounds pretty cool. But it wasn't all perfect, right? You were growing up in mostly in towns that didn't have a lot of other Asians there. And there's a little bit of bullying here or there. One of the laugh out loud moments in your book was your butter knife shanking trampoline play date that you had. There's a little kid, right? Little boy, sang the Siamese cat song to you and, called you a ching chong and that kind of stuff.
All of it. Yeah, don't give it away. But yes, I, of course, like most kids grew up with kids name calling. It was different for me because the name calling was based on my appearance. It was based on my race. It was based on things I couldn't change about myself. And you know how kids have a knack of like, they can cut you to the core because they just know how to press other kids' buttons. And so for me, I think I was like fed up with this kid and was ready to like take matters into my own hands because I didn't have an outlet. Like I wasn't going to talk to my parents about it because you just don't talk to your parents about anything. You know, not only did we have the cultural differences, we also had the generational differences. And so they were not really an option, a resource. And I was an only child. And so I think one of the gifts my parents gave me was to figure it out by myself or to like, they left me to my own devices in a lot of ways. And they actually looked to me and trusted me in a lot of ways with some decisions like decorating the house, for example, you know? And so I grew of the mindset that I would solve my own problems. You know, not the best thing to bring a butter knife to a play date, but luckily no blood was shed. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I was kind of waiting for Connie Chung to make an appearance in your book just because of, the industry that you're in. But it kind of broke my heart a little bit that she was actually weaponized against you a little bit when you were a kid. And that I didn't even think about that because for me as a guy, it was always Bruce Lee or Long Duck Dong or something like that.
Yeah, the worst. I think you guys had it worse than we did because not only was there not great representation in the media of Asian American men, what little there was so emasculating, so wrong, so just like limited. And I think it did a lot of damage. Just like we look back at how girls were taught about weight, in a lot of these movies from like the 90s, they don't age well, or the early 2000s where, girls are made fun of because of their weight, or there's this beauty ideal that thankfully, I feel like my daughters are not contending with the same way that I did. Now, they have their fair share of issues because social media is not a fun place with auto-tuning and face tuning and all the things that are very unrealistic. Yeah. The beauty standard is different now. But for us, it was, movies, magazine covers. And for the men, it was like nobody. Like there was no Daniel Day Kim or Simu Liu or Brian T. Everybody who was shown on TV was either, like some weird war stereotype of a soldier, or it was like some like wimpy, nerdy Asian kid for the men. And so with me, for Connie Chung, it was more just that was the stereotype. Like nobody knew of any other Asian American journalists, even in the year 2000 when I was working in Orlando, Florida. So the best they could do when people would drive by me and I'd see me like shooting or doing whatever I was doing on the sidewalk with the camera and the microphone, the best they could yell was, "Hey, it's Connie Chung," which I didn't take as an insult in any way, but it was just like, wow, we're still living in the 70s, right? Like that's kind of shows you how much work needed to be done, that there was still no national recognition of any Asian American females who had been at the networks. And to this day, there really still aren't that many, right? I can count them on like a couple of hands. Like Weijia, Zhang, who's over at CBS, White House correspondent. There's me at NBC News. Betty Nguyen was at CNN for a little while. Now she's in local news in Miami. But at the national network level, in terms of like correspondents or anchors, we still don't have that many. Ann Curry for a little while at the Today Show. She was more like of the generation when I was paying attention to news and who I watched. Connie was a little more my parents' generation. And I had locally Thuy Vu, who I looked up to very much. She was a Vietnamese American local news reporter when I was coming up in like college and high school, and I got to intern for her. But yeah, there was not a lot of representation, and I think it does matter so much to see people who look like you, sound like you, maybe came from the same background, to make you understand these things are possible for you too.
Yeah, no, that's where, we'll get to that in a minute, but that's where your impact is there, because you are there, you're doing it. Let's jump back a little bit though. So, you were pre physical therapy at USF when you started?
Yeah, I was a bio major.
Good old OChem was the one that kind of got you to change directions a little. I mean, you didn't fail it.
Nope.
But the writing was maybe on the wall or on your heart a little bit. You realized, I don't know about this pre-med stuff.
Yes, OChem was my undoing. OChem was the hardest class I had ever taken. And right around then is also when I met my good friend, Chuan Lam, who likes everybody to know that he's on page 148. But he was actually pursuing a career in TV broadcasting. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I know what a local television news reporter does in the sense I've seen them on TV, but I would never imagine myself pursuing that career path. It's like you see Olivia Rodrigo or Taylor Swift. You're like, I know that they are singers and dancers, but I would never imagine myself doing that because I would have no path. I have no actual role models showing me the how-to guide. And that was Chuan for me. He just made it so accessible. He was like, yeah, you switch your major to communication, you take these classes, you do these internships, and this is how you achieve that, type of career path. And so that plus OChem getting crazy hard was like enough to make me say, let me give it a shot. And thanks to Chuan, I was able to make a big pivot. I still got a bio minor from graduating because I had taken so many science courses until that point. And to my parents' credit, they took it in stride. Okay, you want to be communications? You want to be a journalist? Great, no problem. And that is really how it happened, kind of on a dime. I turned.
Yeah, and it worked out. I'm happy to say it worked out a little bit for you.
Yeah, I did okay, I'd say.
You're doing all right. And so you end up all around the country for a little while. But then, maybe early 2000, the aughts, you end up at San Jose, NBC Bay Area.
Yes. 2007, I believe.
Yeah. So We Investigate was the motto down there. And did you find that just kind of like a shoe fitting well, that investigating and consumer reporting was something that you really liked doing?
I think investigative reporting was probably the most important thing that happened to me in my career, in the sense it gave me access to developing my skills and like a toolkit as a journalist that was so valuable. We need general assignment reporters. And that's what I did most of my career, which is the who, what, when, where. But the how and the why, right? The deep dives, the ability to request public records and have some time to dig into them, to confront people, to hold the powerful accountable. That is the work of investigative journalists, is to tell the stories people actively do not want you to tell, to expose the information people do not want exposed, because it is that kind of information that is not only hard to get, but can result in lasting and important change, whether it's putting bad guys in jail, changing laws and policies that affect other people for generations to come. It's, the most important part of what we do. Sometimes it's just in literally getting people money back, right? It could be hundreds of dollars, it could be thousands of dollars. It could be helping other people avoid those same traps. And so what I got to learn when I was invited to join the investigative unit at NBC Bay Area was such a valuable skill set that set me up so well for what I do now. For the network of NBC News, which is consumer and investigative reporting. We're doing a lot focused on the health insurance industry right now, which is rife for investigation and exposure. We do a lot on food safety. We're doing a lot on consumer health. And so I'm getting back to some of my roots, but, consumer is such a broad umbrella. I also cover like travel trends and, do those anti-aging devices really work for your face? So I am so grateful for my beat because truly consumer touches everything. And it's a big, wide, fun ocean to swim in.
Love it. Yeah, I still remember that report that you guys did on the Cisco food handling, food locker thing. That was some crazy investigative reporting there. That was kind of stakeout middle of the night.
Undercover, there was surveillance, there were confrontations, and it ended up resulting in a nearly $20 million fine against this food service company, Cisco, SYSCO, not the other Cisco that makes the software. There's a whole chapter, I think, in the book, if not more than one, talking about how that all came to be. So if anyone is interested in investigative journalism, that is one of the most exciting and impactful series of reports that I've worked on.
Yeah, and low-speed car chases.
Which are harder than they sound.
All right, we talked about them a little bit already, but your family is woven all through this book. And like you said, there's some ups and downs in it, and it isn't perfect. But, for some of us, I think maybe 2 or 3 big life changes is something that we might experience in our lifetime. But for your parents, it feels like they've experienced quite a few changes over the years. How has your relationship with them changed over the years?
I think when you become a parent yourself, you're able to look back at your own parents with so much more grace. And now I know that they're not going to be with me forever. I'm much quicker to forgive and forget and to recognize that they are doing and did do the very best that they could with what they had and have. I think that's the greatest and biggest evolution in myself as a daughter. It's easy to hold on to hurt and hold on to, to feel a certain kind of way, resentment and that sort of thing. But I think when you look back on the entirety of your parents' lives and what they're trying to do with what they have. And I think a lot of us immigrant kids can relate because our parents went through a lot to just even get to this country. In some places, starting completely over, right? Sometimes they come and they were a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a computer scientist in their home country. And now they have to come here and do menial labor, and be treated in such a terrible way. My parents were more entrepreneurial in Vietnam, and then they came here and were able to continue to do that and sort of be their own bosses. So that helped them a lot, I think, with the transition. But we definitely had our ups and downs as a family, and also financially. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I look back and I wouldn't change a single thing because it made me who I am. And I think having some of the pressures that I did early in my career, which, I don't want to spoil the book, because I want your listeners to go out and read it for themselves. And I think they will really love it. I truly, in all my stories and reporting, there is something in there for everyone. There are a lot of takeaways for folks. But I will say that because of some of the financial pressures I faced early in my career, it made me who I was. It made me probably stick to this path of being a journalist and one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. If I had had a more comfortable life, if things had been going well, maybe I would have, quit journalism. There were many times I thought about it. There were many times when it was really tough and I thought maybe I should go do something more lucrative. But I just kept going and it got me here. And I'm so grateful to be here. To your point, Curtis, about Vicky Nguyen being, on that graphic every morning on the Today Show or on my show, NBC News Daily. My Vietnamese last name is like the Smith of American last names. You see it, I'm Vietnamese. And if any kid sees that out there and goes, oh, wow, look at her. Look at what she's doing. Oh, that's interesting. Let me learn a little bit more. Great. Because I want to be there for kids. I want kids to see it and be it. And I think if there's anything I can do to keep the door open, not only for myself, but to hold it open for anyone else who wants to come up and say, if she did it, I can do it. Then, I'll keep trying for as long as I can.
Yeah, that's great. And then just to tease one last thing, it's also a 30-year love story built into this book too.
Yeah, you're right. It is. I met Brian when I was 14. We started dating when I was 16. I'm 46 now, so that would make it 30 plus years. Yeah. Wow, when you put it that way, that sounds like a really long time.
That's not easy.
I've lived longer with him in my life than I have without.
That's true. And through all kinds of cities and all kinds of ups and downs. So shout out to the good Dr. Brian.
The good doctor, definitely from Bloggity. That was his nickname. He likes to remain in the shadows. He likes to keep a low profile. He understands and steps up to the plate when I need to have him in a story for, the Today Show. We've done quite a few of those. And especially during the pandemic when my kids were the camera operators, my husband was the camera operators. Sometimes they were the characters in the story. They were the people we were demonstrating masks on or how to safely shop or go on vacation as a family. So he knows when it is required of him, and he recognizes that I couldn't write a story about my life without at least mentioning him a few times, since he was a pretty important part of it all. But for the most part, he tries to keep a low profile. But none of who I am is possible without his support too, for sure. And for readers, he's doing great. He's doing great. I didn't realize that I left it so cliffhangery. Is he okay? He's doing fine. He's wonderful.
Okay. Good to hear. All right. Well, I think we're going to tease it right there and leave you guys wanting more. I think Vicky's really good at dropping teasers in the chapters. Every last line of a chapter is a tease for the next chapter. You can go get Boat Baby wherever you get books. We highly recommend a local independent bookstore. But especially anyone who's experienced this kind of journey, any young Asian girls out there, anyone who has aspirations beyond the things that are right in front of them. This is such a great book for them. So go get a copy of Boat Baby. All right, Vicky, you've survived our difficult questions. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure. And Curtis, thank you so much for the plug. I so appreciate it. And I've loved so much the feedback that the book has gotten, the way it's resonated with readers. I'm just delighted because it's exactly what I hope people would get from it.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great, everyone. All right, first question, whatever comes to mind. What Vietnamese dish reminds you of home the most?
Well, I've been thinking about this because I love com tam, I ate that a lot as a kid. That's broken rice, usually seasoned with fish sauce and with like sliced pork on the side, a fried egg, no which is pickled daikon and carrots, green scallion, oil on top of it, and bee, which is like a shredded pork mixed with like it's like this chewy. I don't even know how to describe the substance, but that is like probably a dish I ate a lot. Petkaw is another one, which is like this caramelized pork with like a caramelized hard-boiled egg in it, with this amazing umami, like delicious kind of sauce broth that it's all cooked in. So that's another one, because those are things that my parents make at home. And they're canchua, which is amazing. It's like a fish soup that's sweet sour. It has like pineapples in it and mung bean sprouts and fish, like usually catfish, white fish. And what is the thing? Gosh, I'm like, it's slipping my mind right now. Oh my gosh. The thing that you cut like on the diagonal and it's green and it has like a bunch of holes in it. I'm gonna remember the second we get off the podcast. So those are some of the home cooked dishes that really, remind me of home. But the things people are familiar with, probably pho, bánh mì, bún riêu, bún bò Huế. I mean, honestly, you cannot go wrong with Vietnamese food. It probably is the best cuisine in the world.
It's so good. It's different than a lot of Asian cuisine. So much fresh veg in there. So many green leaves. Yeah.
Very labor intensive. So many herbs, so many flavors. Super delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of food, though, so you've lived all around this country. Is there any surprisingly good food towns for Asian food around this country that maybe we don't know about? We know about New York. We know about San Jose. But is there any surprises out there for us?
I mean, you're spoiled in the Bay Area. Let's just get real. Because in New York, for Vietnamese food, very tough to find. You're better off in New Jersey and even Pennsylvania. It's almost like we didn't get this far east. Same with Mexican food, by the way. You might be shocked. Yeah. Great Cuban food in New York. Great Puerto Rican food. Dominican food. But that's like Caribbean Latino food, right? Like Mexican food also, I feel, is so much better on the West Coast. And many more of those like authentic mom and pop type restaurants. Like you might get some Mexican out here, but it'll be like a big chain, Here, New York is best for like Italian. Flushing has great Chinese food, dumplings and that kind of thing. But, and there's a Korean barbecue section. I would not necessarily, I think, San Jose can really hold its own, El Camino Real. And same with like K-Town in LA, right? So I think the food scene on the West Coast really does trump the food scene on the East Coast, even though New York is so famous for so many things and people line up for so many things. Dollar for dollar, pound for pound, I'll go West Coast, best coast for food and for weather. For food and for weather. Some things New York definitely does well. And I love that there's such a wide cuisine, like a wide variety of cuisines and palates represented here. And it's big, so I give it credit for that. And then surprising food towns in terms of like all the different places I've lived, I would say, or visited. I think that Houston has a really great food scene that people sometimes might not pay attention to.
Yeah.
I'd say Houston's kind of surprising.
There's a big Vietnamese population there too.
For sure for Vietnamese food. But then you've got like a mix too with barbecue and like really great Tex-Mex, which I love. So that's a really fun place to be.
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir. All right, one thing you're famous for, well, I remember you being famous for this, is the family Christmas card. The one I remember you posting maybe in the 2000s was the one is based on Gangnam Style, where there's a big explosion, and it's lenticular.
Yes.
Which is one where you tilt it, and it's one picture, and then you tilt it, it's another picture. Do you have a favorite Christmas card that you've produced over the years? Pretty epic ones.
Dude, that one is one of the most epic one because, I think kids are familiar with it. Like those little things, sometimes you have a sticker or like a little trading card and you move it and it looks like it's moving. So we did a Gangnam Style where we were like kind of doing the dance, the side dance. But I loved our Barbie card. That one was picked up by the Today Show and it was one of like the most fun. A major shout out to my friend Kit Doe. San Jose product, was working at KPIX for a very long time as a reporter on air as well. And as a dear family friend and the like creative genius who puts together all of the zany out of this world ideas that we come up with. Mad Max was another one that I really enjoyed that we did. Our most recent one was an Andy Warhol inspired card, but they're all different. They're all unique in their own way and they're all very stressful to think of when the time comes around, because we start planning and thinking about it like in the summer when nobody's thinking about Christmas. But we have to, now that Kit lives in California and we live in New York, we also have to coordinate schedules and travel. So But yeah, that is a tradition I'm so happy we started, but also one that's like really tough to maintain. But the response and everybody who gets to see the card and gets the card, it makes it all worthwhile.
No, it is super fun. Well, I think we're bumping against the clock here a little bit, Vicky. What's new for you? You got anything coming up in a minute or two?
You know, right now I am leaning fully into Boat Baby and all of the journeys that she's taking me on. She's continuing to sail steadily along. You know, book events are coming up, talks, interviews, podcasts. So I'm just really trying to do something I am very bad at doing, which is to pause, to reflect, to really, embrace and enjoy this. The full-time job doesn't take a backseat to anything, right? Like Tom
Right.
Yamas is coming in to be the new anchor of NBC Nightly News after
Oh, yeah.
Lester Holt's incredible run. And so I'll be doing more for Nightly News as well. So the Today Show, Nightly News, Boat Baby, and then my own family. Those are like the 4 areas of priority in my
Yeah.
life right now. There's some talk about, what comes next, but I can't even wrap my mind around it. And maybe if any of your listeners have ideas about what they'd like to see me write about next, by all means, just don't expect it for a long time.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We're looking forward to it. Can I ask one last thing of you?
Of course.
Since you are a professional, could I get you to read a tagline for me?
Of course.
You can say whatever you want, but something like this, the gist of it.
Okay. This is Vicky Nguyen from New York City. I am the author of the best-selling memoir, Boat Baby, and I'm in conversation with Curtis and so grateful to be here. And you are listening to the Infatuasian podcast.
Perfect. You're a pro.
Was that okay?
That's perfect. One take, Vicky.
Amazing. It was so nice to talk with you, Curtis. I'm so glad you found me and reached out. And thank you for the shout out to Boat Baby back in the day. It was a nice little walk down memory lane, too.
Such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk soon.
You too. Thank you. And be sure to let me know when this airs and send me the link and everything so I can share it too.
Gotcha. All right.
All right.
Have a good one.
Take care. My best to you and yours. Bye.
Bye-bye.